welcome to the Wormhole Podcast, episode 41. I'm Charlie Place, and joining me today is the author of The Orange Grove, which was published in March. Hello, Rosanna Ley.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you on. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. You?
I'm very good, yes. The sun's shining, I'm happy and raring to go.
Yes, that's always good, isn't it?
So if I give what I hope is a brief intro to our listeners about your book. The Orange Grove is set in West Dorset and Seville, spread over 3 narratives, 2 decades. In 2018, Brighton-based Holly is burned out from her stressful job, and she's wanting to move back home to Dorset and open a niche shop that will sell all kinds of orange-related products. She asks her mother Ella to join her on a business trip to Seville to meet up with suppliers. Ella's shock of the idea of going to Seville is evident, and nobody knows why except her. In 1988, Ella and her husband Felix, so Holly's dad, went on a rare holiday to Seville. Felix left to go back home almost immediately because his mother had a fall, but Ella stayed on. So Ella's deciding to go with Holly anyway in 2018. It'll be quite a trip for both of them. It's going to give Felix some pause too. Rosanna, shall we start with your reading?
Yes, okay, that's fine. And by the way, I thought you précéded that really well. I think you should always be the one who's talking about the book because, it's not easy to actually describe what happens in the book. And I thought you did it very, very well.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so the section I'm going to read is in Ella's viewpoint, and it is actually the first time that she witnesses the flamenco. So it comes a little way, maybe just under a third through the book, and I will start reading now. As she stood there at the bar, there was a hush as the lights dimmed. Ella glanced towards the makeshift stage. Too late. It looked as though the show was starting. 2 men walked onto the platform to the enthusiastic applause of the audience. The first, dressed in a red satin shirt, black trousers and shiny patent shoes, sat down and placed the drum he was carrying between his knees. The second man, dressed all in black, picked up the guitar. Caleb. He looked over. For a moment his gaze seemed to lock onto hers. But the lights were so low, and a lone spotlight was shining onto the stage, so surely it was impossible. She must be imagining it. Caleb sat down on one chair and hooked his right foot onto the rung of another, placing his guitar on his thigh. He flexed his long fingers as if to get the blood circulating more freely, and then began to play, rhythmically and slowly, the fingers of his right hand plucking notes that rang stridently across the floor. The drummer picked up the beat with a slow slap. Caleb, too, was tapping his other foot in time. The pulse was building. It was a sound unlike any Ella had ever heard, a sound of anticipation, almost of waiting. The 2 men glanced across at one another, and the drummer closed his eyes, then began to sing in a low, raspy voice. It was an anguished sound, almost a soft wail, and Ella winced at first, but as the sound continued to resonate around the room, she started feeling the emotion. It was impossible not to. The singer seemed to be reaching inside himself to a place deep in his soul, and the emotions were of nostalgia, of sadness, and of pain. The 2 men were in harmony. The music matched the singer's voice, the rhythm from Caleb's guitar both underlining it and structuring it. Ella wished she was closer to the stage. Caleb's facial expression had altered too. It had grown more intense and more focused as his fingers moved deftly over the strings, as the beat switched once more, and the tempo of the complex harmonies got faster. Ella couldn't believe that so much sound, so much tone and feeling could come from one instrument. Her heart seemed to be beating faster too. As the music paused and the singer slowed, just clapping out the beat now with his feet and hands, the dancer entered from a back door on the other side of the stage. She wore a polka dot red and black dress with red shoes. Her raven hair flowed over her shoulders, and to Ella's surprise, she was at least middle-aged, but still a fine figure of a woman, tall and handsome, with generous curves. Still and defiant, she took up a commanding stance at the front of the stage. An air of expectancy filled the room as the music slackened once more. Quick, slow, quick, slow. The dancer's gaze was fixed, trance-like, above the heads of the audience, and her first movement was a gentle sway and rustle of her dress as she raised her arms above her head, moving into her starting pose. She thrust out her jaw, head held high. There was a long pause, a silence. Caleb played a musical chord, almost as if for speculation. The dancer clicked her heels on the floor in reply, and she began to move, slowly at first, twisting like a flame, then staccato, her feet pounding as the tempo grew, and the music built in complex layers around her. She snapped her fingers to the beat. She tossed her head. She wove and stamped and took charge of the stage. She was strong and powerful. She was responding to the throbbing and strumming of the guitar music, just as Caleb seemed to be responding to her. Almost as if this dance was improvised, Ella found herself thinking. But how could it be improvised when it was so professional, so good? The dancer's expression became more tormented, her movements smouldering, then frenzied as she spun and clicked, faster and faster, reaching the climax of the dance in a burst of explosive heat. Finally, she came to rest, standing on the edge of the stage as before. Ella let out a breath of pure release. Such precision and control, such passion. It was a powerful combination. She couldn't repress a shudder. So this was flamenco.
So I think most, if not every listener, will know the passion and the pace of flamenco, and you've got so much detailing in there that feels like you're there. You can see it in your head as the scene's continuing.
Thank you.
Would it be right to say that the flamenco is an important aspect further than even itself to your romantic storyline?
What way do you mean? Do you mean in a symbolic way?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, the flamenco is a very sensual, powerful dance. And I think the effect that it has on the characters, first of all, Ella, and then also the effect that it has on her daughter, Holly, sort of transports them not just to Spain and not just to Seville, but to a different sort of place. And I think it's to do with female strength as well, and kind of empowerment, really, because the flamenco musicians, and particularly the dancers, as I tried to convey there in that piece, they are very, very powerful. And it's a kind of conversation that goes on with the musician and the dancer, and it's over and above a mere dance, as you say, or a mere song. It's a cultural thing, but it's just a very strong soul link, I suppose.
Well, I liked how you did it because it was there at the start, and obviously you've got the music in itself and it's there for itself. Staying on Ella's experience here, but a bit different. You've got the further detailing in the book on relationship and connections. The time spent on the nitty-gritty is just so realistic. And the careful use that you've got of time itself is wonderful. But it's a simple plot on the surface, so well done and looked into. Was there a starting point for Ella's story?
Thank you. Yeah, I like writing dual timeline stories anyway. I like writing, I suppose, in parallel. And quite often when I write, I will write one story and then I'll write the other story and then I'll kind of weave them in together. So I suppose the starting point, it's very difficult to describe because it all sort of happened together as I was planning the story and as I was planning the parallel that I wanted to try and convey between the mother and the daughter. And obviously it's to do with the secrets that her mother has sort of held. I think I want every character to have a particular journey. And although at the beginning of the story in contemporary time, Ella seems on the surface to be happy and everything's fine and her marriage is okay and all that sort of thing. But really, this other stuff is still there and it does have to be addressed at some point. So Holly sort of starting her shop, bit of Orange, and wanting to go to Seville to source products and all that sort of thing. Obviously, that is the trigger for Ella to go back. And it's only really when she kind of faces up to all the things that happened that she can move forward in a meaningful way in her life. I don't want to say too much, give away too many spoilers, but yeah, that's kind of how I saw it.
Well, I've got a sort of spoilerific question, so I will leave it to you later when we get to it. If you want to leave it or not, that's fine. As said, the details, lots of it, it's brilliant. And you've got so many details about the products and the supply in Seville and the business deals that Holly does. The general information about Seville as well. You tell us about your research.
Yeah, sure. I plan in quite a lot of detail before I go to the place itself, because I want to know exactly what I need to know, if that makes sense. So I researched the different products that Holly might need for her shop and where they might come from in Seville or near to Seville, and then sort of planned where exactly I was going to go to so that I could experience them, taste them. In the case of, for example, the orange wine, I arranged a visit to Gospa Citrus organic orange farm, which is actually outside of Seville, but it's not that far away, and looked around there with one of the owners and got lots and lots of information from him, which was really useful because I wanted Holly to visit the farm and to find out all the things that I was going to find out. With some of the perfumes and with other products that Holly was going to source in Seville, I literally just went into places and talked to the people who were making them or who were selling them or that kind of thing. And then a lot of the other research is really about going to the places where scenes are going to be set. And in this case, quite a lot of the action was taking place in Triana, which is just over the river. And that's the place which is the biggest for ceramics, and also the old gypsy quarter, the bullfighting, the flamenco, really everything kind of in that way started there. Tried to find a really authentic flamenco show to go to. There are a lot that are put on for the tourists. So a lot of it is trying to get a little bit behind the scenes and maybe finding out something or seeing something, experiencing something that perhaps your ordinary tourist might not, just going that little bit deeper.
Going back to the business deals that Holly does, something I wondered, and I wonder if maybe you could say, given that you're from Dorset yourself, would it be a viable business?
Yes, I really think so. I mean, I just think it'd be such a good idea. The idea started with Seville orange marmalade, which I really love. And in Bridport, where I live just outside Bridport, actually, there's a little country market and a farmer's market, sort of once a month as well. But this country market is every week. And they sell things like orange marmalade. And Bridport is one of those. Do you know Bridport?
I don't know.
It's a market town, but it's quite quirky, quite individual. It has a lot of individual shops, doesn't have many chains. It's the kind of place where I could imagine this sort of shop being. And I just thought, well, when you think about it, there's so many orange things. It's pretty obvious. But what I mean is, I suppose, products that are made from oranges, like all the bath products, all the soaps and all the shampoos, the oils, the fragrances. It just seemed like there was so much. And I thought, hey, it's a really good idea. I could just imagine that happening in Bridport. So I really hope that someone is going to take this idea and run with it.
Well, I mean, if they don't, you know quite a bit now yourself from your research.
You mean I could do it myself?
You could, but at the same time, I want you to write more books, So.
Yeah, I wouldn't have time to do it myself, but I think it's a great idea, and I'm willing to pass the idea over. Anyone can take it.
It's a lovely one. You could just picture everything and would be lovely. Where did you come across the cake?
Well, the cake, I was trying to find a cake that was, I suppose, what you'd call a celebratory cake, in the sense of being a little bit out of the ordinary. So I found it online. But what I did was I sort of added and changed it a little bit to make it special, because I think when you have an old family recipe, I like to think that there is something different about that recipe that makes it into a little bit of a special secret, perhaps. I'd like to say that I made it, but actually a friend of mine made it, which is awful, isn't it, to admit, but she was willing and keen to make it. And so I sourced the oranges for her and she made it. And because it's made with ground almonds rather than flour, there's no flour in it at all, that gives it something quite different. It just makes it really kind of moist, and again, it's got this lovely fragrance to it. So it is quite unusual, but it is around, it does exist. Since then, I've seen it on MasterChef, actually. Someone was making it, and I was like, hang on a minute. I didn't know whether it was exactly the same recipe, but that's my cake.
Well, just at the start of the book, the details are quite there. I think the only thing you're missing in that scene is the quantities.
Yes, and I have put that on my website now.
Yeah, I will include that in the notes.
Yeah, I did resist it to start with, because a few people wrote to me and they said, oh, well, you don't actually give us the recipe for the cake. We want the recipe. And I was like, oh, it's a secret. But then I relented and decided it would be quite nice to actually sort of publish the recipes and a picture of the cake as made by my friend, Anita.
So, on a different subject, I was pleasantly surprised by Felix being included as a narrator. I hadn't expected that at all. It does give you a big heads up for the future of the overall situation, of what might happen, you know, as you continue and you get more information. Had you set out to include him from the very first?
It's an interesting question, because when it comes to viewpoints, it's always quite difficult to decide. Obviously, you've got your main characters, in this case, Ella and Holly. Clearly, they were both going to have a viewpoint each. And I sort of tend to think, well, where is the emotion going to lie in the novel? Do I want to really kind of find out feelings, etc., of any of the other characters? And if so, then clearly I will need to use them as a narrator. So that was one reason why I included Felix, because of what happens to him throughout the book. I did want to include his emotions, and to have them secondhand, I think, would have been a lot weaker. And he's quite a difficult character to write. I was quite interested to see what people would make of him, and I have had some different comments. I didn't want him to come across as being too weak, and that was an obvious danger. And so I thought if I gave him a viewpoint, I could go more in depth into his emotions and things that had happened to him in his early life that were perhaps partially responsible for the way that he is behaving now during the story, which will give more motivation, really. It's quite hard to do that without him being a viewpoint character. So that was the main reason. And I hope his good points and his strengths in a different way did come across to readers. And I think generally it seems that they did, even though he doesn't have the obvious Spanish flair and charisma that some of the Spanish men have got. Poor Felix. But I liked him, and there are different sorts of love, aren't there, and different sorts of feelings for people, and I wanted him to represent something different.
Well, I like how he doesn't go anywhere in the present day section. He stays at home while his family go abroad, but he has this massive growth of character. Yeah, he does. It's lovely. Had you considered the 1988 Ella, if we say it's staying put in Seville and maybe not going back to Felix?
Had I considered it?
Yes.
It's difficult because I think obviously she considered it, and therefore, in a way, I considered it as well. But it wasn't how I ever envisaged the story panning out. For me, the question was really about what would happen at the end, because 1988 is quite a long time ago, isn't it?
Yes.
And the situation then for her obviously would have been very different to the way that it would be in, let's say, 2020. She almost felt at the time as if she didn't have any choice. And for me, in the story, that was kind of the way it happened. It had to happen. Yeah. I don't know whether that even answers your question. Sorry, it's very vague.
Yeah, you did answer the question. I mean, I think it was interesting that, I mean, you have got this foresight there through Felix and stuff, which works as well. But there is this constant question that you're giving to the reader. You know, the reader's got to consider, should Ella stay or should she go? What should she do? Did she make the right choice even? And I mean, obviously, in the context of your story, she does.
Or does she? You know, I don't know whether she has made the right decision necessarily. Like you say, everything would be different, wouldn't it? If she'd done something different, then she could have had just as good a life, or maybe a better life, or maybe a worse life. What do you think there? Do you think it would have been a better life? Or
Depends on the context of how you come to it, I think. I think it would have definitely been a very, very different life. And part of her, a certain part of her that was happy there would have been thrilled, but there might still have been that other part of her that wondered if she was doing the right thing.
Yeah, she might have felt very guilty.
Hmm.
I think it would have been a great choice, actually. I think she would have had a really good life. In many ways, I think it would have been the right choice because he really was the love of her life. But because she didn't make that choice, you know, it didn't happen. I don't know how much of this we should be saying because it's full of spoilers, isn't it? There you go.
That's all right. I hope listeners are used to the in-depth questions I ask and stuff like that.
Okay.
Different character that hasn't been talked about so much. Will Ella and Ingrid's relationship continue to get better?
I think it might, but I don't think they're ever going to be really close. I just can't imagine it. I think what has happened is that they understand each other better. And that understanding is very important in a relationship because the relationship can function much better because of it. But I don't think they're ever going to really be that close. No, I don't. She's tricky, isn't she, Ingrid? Really, she's tricky.
Well, she obviously had her misgivings at the start, and then unfortunately, I suppose they were kind of added to as they went on in an unfortunate way.
Yes.
Good to get your answer. So I'm going to ask this question first. What's next?
Well, I'm writing a book which has a working title of The Walled Garden at the moment. And I've been writing it now for about a year, I suppose. So I'm well into it. I'm well into the first draft. I haven't been on my research trip yet for obvious reasons. And I'm getting a bit twitchy because normally I have been by now. And I'm, thinking, oh dear, I've got to go and I've got to see everything and do everything. That's Puglia in southern Italy. But the book, again, is set partly in Dorset and partly this time in Italy. And I would say it's a little bit more complex and a little bit darker. And I don't know whether that's all happened because of lockdown or whether I had a little bit more time to write this book. And so I thought, I'll write something a bit more complex to make it harder for myself. It's possible. Structurally, I am facing a lot of challenges at the moment. And until I finish the first draft and gone back to kind of look at it again, work it all out, then I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to pan out. But I'm really enjoying writing it. The Walled Garden, in this case, is both a sanctuary and a prison. And that's something that has been really interesting to explore. And again, it's dual timeline. So part of it is set just after the Second World War, and the other part is set in more or less contemporary time, 2018 actually.
So have you had to temporarily put a pause on the aspects that are going to be in Italy until you can go there and research?
I've just left lots of gaps. So I've just put things in the manuscript all over the place where it just says add. And then when I do get there, I will have a long list of things that I have to do and places I have to go to. and all that description will be added. Originally, I just wrote the Dorset scenes and thought, oh, well, you're going there soon, I'll be able to do it. But I think it's been postponed 3 times so far. So I did get to the point where I did have to start writing the Italian scenes. I just haven't really written the description. There's quite a lot of stuff missing from it at the moment.
Fantastic. So tell us about your writing retreats.
Oh, okay. Well, the main one that I do now is in Andalusia. We fly to Malaga and then we drive about 45 minutes, 50, maybe an hour actually, into the mountains. And it's a hotel, a very small hotel, only 14 rooms, an absolute retreat. It's so tranquil, so peaceful, so beautiful. It's just somewhere where me and the group of writers that I'm taking with me, can just kind of relax, let go, and then have some writing time, some me time. So what I tend to do is I have sessions in the morning where I do writing exercises and little writing bits and pieces to try and spark ideas or to add more depth to existing writing, that kind of thing. And then we go our separate ways and I meet up with people and have one-to-ones during the rest of the morning. And then late afternoon, we meet up again and we share work that people have written, just pieces that they've brought with them or pieces that they've written while they're there, just get general feedback from everybody. Then we go out to dinner, have a good time, have a few drinks. I just love it. And I've missed it so much. I didn't realise how amazing it was until I wasn't there. And I thought, oh, I miss it so much. I go there twice a year now, once in either February or March, and then again in July. And the people that come, some of them are the same people who've been coming for a long time, but we always have a few new people as well every time. It's impossible to describe, but it's one of those places that is just very, very special. And people love it. They just really love it. And I'm just fortunate enough to have found it and to be able to host a retreat or a holiday there every year. Very fortunate. Can't wait to get back.
Wonderful. When are the next dates? Do you have an idea of the next dates that people could book for?
Well, I do, but we've just cancelled one. So we had one set up, well, at the beginning of July, and we just had to postpone that one, unfortunately. So the next one now will be next March, I hope. That's full already, I'm afraid, but there is another one in July, which I haven't opened up. So if anyone who's listening is interested, they can find out more information by just going onto my website, which is rosannaley.com. And there's an address on there, an email address. You can write to me and I can send you a brochure. There's photographs of the place as well and all that sort of thing. So you can find out more by doing that.
Quite an elevator pitch in a way, isn't it? This one's full, go to the next one. It's a good thing. So, links to purchase the Orange Grove are in the episode description, along with my email address. If you have enjoyed this conversation, do subscribe for future episodes. Rosanna, this has been absolutely lovely. We've had a lovely afternoon talking to you, and I've loved getting into all the details, even the bits that we've gone slightly towards the spoilers, but getting all those details out and having that conversation about that has been wonderful, and it's just brought so much more to the book. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me, Charlie. It was great, and I really loved our chat and loved the questions. Great time. Thank you very much.
The next interview will be on Monday, the 26th of July. The Wormhole Podcast, episode 41, was recorded on the 25th of June and published on the 12th of July, 2021. Music and production by Charlie Place.